Hello, everyone. Welcome back to yet another episode of I.M.MBA, that is, Investigating Modern MBA, a podcast brought to you by I.M. Sirmaur. Today, we have another interrogating industry conversation, and today, the guest on the podcast is a profile we all aspire for as an MBA student. So, he is an SRCC graduate, went to Yale, got into World Bank, and currently working with International Monetary Fund. So a huge profile and a very famous name on LinkedIn as well. You might know him, Vatsal Nahata. I won't be introducing him any further. We have a great and a very heavy conversation coming towards you. So put on your earphones, open up your brains, and get ready for some great content. So let's just directly dive into the conversation. Come on. Okay. Hi Vatsal, how are you?
Hey Dhruv, nice to join you, and I'm good. Hope you're well too.
Yes, I'm all good, and I am very excited for this conversation. You are an ideal profile which I've been dreaming about all my life, and today I'm getting to talk to you. So I cannot express my feelings how excited I am.
Oh no, thank you so much, Dhruv, for those kind words, and I hope I don't disappoint. Yeah,
Not at all,
yeah.
not at all. Okay. So Vatsal, before we start the podcast, there's this one ritual at I.M.MBA that the
Okay.
guest who is joining us, they introduce themselves, that what exactly are they doing, how they see themselves, and then we start the conversation. So kindly introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Sure. So I think, I really liked sort of the sentence you just said, how you see yourself compared to like introduce yourself, because I think over the last like 2, 3 years, in terms of like a brief introduction. So I currently work as a research analyst with the International Monetary Fund, um, based out of Washington, D.C., where I'm basically engaged in macroeconomic research. And before that, I was in the World Bank, and then I finished my master's in economics from Yale University. And I did my bachelor's in economics from Shriram College of Commerce. So originally, I'm a Kolkata boy. Was born and brought up in Kolkata itself. And the way, however, that I see myself is, part economist, part content creator, part mentor and teacher. So that is the way I kind of see myself. And, that's how I guess even we connected, right, on LinkedIn, and we sort of went from there. So yeah, this has kind of been a brief journey that I've had over the past few years. Yeah.
Okay. So currently, are you in Washington?
So currently I'm in Kolkata. So I'm
Okay.
here basically for about a month. And then I'll be going back third week of March back to the US. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, a very odd question to start a podcast with, but what time do you sleep?
So I do not sleep later than 1 a.m., but
Okay.
because this is an odd question, it also has an odd answer, which is so when I sleep, I always kind of fall asleep to like a serious podcast of some sort as well.
Okay.
So until and unless my brain can kind of absorb, the podcast and the material, I basically stay awake. And basically when I sleep, it's like, yeah, like, when my mind is like completely zoned out. But yeah, that's usually about 12 o'clock, 11:30 or 12 o'clock on most days. Yeah.
Okay. I hope this podcast gets into your list in the next week.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. You've been sleeping around 1 a.m. And has this been the case throughout your life, or it has gradually come to 1 a.m.?
No, no, no. So, I mean, what I meant was 1 a.m. is more like the latest time, but usually it's about 11:30 to 12. And it really depends. Like in the US, I actually sleep much earlier. So I sleep at around 10 to 10:30 p.m. because I like to wake up early, and then I have to prepare my breakfast and iron my shirt and then prepare for office and then kind of leave for office. And I like to reach office by 8:30, 9 o'clock. In the US, I kind of sleep early, but when I'm in India, like for the last month or so, I've been, yeah, like my routine's a little shaken up because I'm working like half US timings, half India timings. So I typically like my office kind of goes from like 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. of sorts. So yeah.
So are you on a vacation or are you still working?
So currently, I've taken like a little bit of leave. So yeah, I'm in vacation like in during these days, but yeah, I'll start work from next week again. Yeah.
So the
Mhm.
reason why I asked this question to you was because you are an SRCC graduate, then got into Yale, got into World Bank, and now working with IMF. So this profile doesn't look like someone who has been sleeping early in life. That is what the reason was for asking this question. But following this, I have this one more question for you. Uh, so Vatsal, what I wanted to touch upon directly in the start of the podcast is the UPSC part of your profile. That doesn't really reflect anywhere in your profile, but you have prepared for UPSC for 1 year, right? And you always wanted to go into public policy, if I'm not wrong, because first UPSC and then going into Yale, becoming an economist and working with World Bank and IMF as international organizations. So, did you already know in your undergrad that you wanted to pursue this path of public policy?
Yeah, so that is a very interesting question, and the answer to that is no. So
Okay.
the way I've kind of always prepared my life and kind of whatever outlook I have for the future, I always have like two, three things I want to pursue simultaneously and kind of run experiments on those two, three things and then kind of see, where do I enjoy myself, where am I intellectually stimulated, and where are the payoffs really good, whether that's in terms of money or impact or prestige. So UPSC was something that, I had never really planned per se, and it happened to me quite organically in college. And then in college, I had my hands kind of dipped in three different areas. So I had a job offer from a consulting firm. I had, taken the GRE and I was preparing, like I put in my applications for masters and I got into like four colleges. But I also wanted to do UPSC. And then I basically took a gap of like 1 year. I deferred my master's programs by 1 year. And I did not take up the consulting job offer. And that is how basically like I underwent UPSC and it did not work out, but I had like a plan B. And that's broadly like how I've structured my life throughout, which is whether it's in school or college or masters or even currently like my job as well. I always have kind of two, three things going on in my life, and I kind of run micro experiments with my life. And whatever kind of works or I feel interested in, I kind of go after that. So I used to be a big believer in like having very long-term plans and career goals, but I've realized more and more that it's only a matter of like you don't have to have one particular goal, have kind of two, three things you want to involve yourself in, and then empirically, realistically, kind of see what's working, what's not working, and then double down on the thing that is basically working. So, yeah.
Okay, we'll get back to this. But as people say that when you have a plan B, your plan A seems to be less viable, or you don't give in your 100% to your plan A. What is your take on that?
So, I actually, I think humans are not homogeneous. For
Hmm.
some people, it works. For some people, it doesn't work. So, for example, for a lot of people, they are like this that if they have a plan B, they'll not be able to do well in their plan A.
Yeah.
Or they won't even have a plan B, for instance. But for some people, if they have some modicum of security in their plan B, they'll actually do much better in their plan A because they're not as stressed out. So I think it's basically like think of it like hedging. If you have kind of one sort of okay, the other way I would kind of tell whoever's watching this podcast is, supposing you have a dream in life, but supposing money is kind of the thing that's troubling you, that, if you say pursue your dreams, you may not get your salary, for instance.
Mm.
But what if you could engineer your life in such a way that you're getting, say, 40, 50,000 a month in India, for example, or like $2,000 in the US, where you get to meet your expenses, you get to meet everything. And that's like a plan B for you. And your plan is you pursue your dream. And my
Hmm.
sense is if I give a lot of people that option, they'll easily leave their jobs tomorrow and they'll actually, pursue their dream. So my point is, for some people it works, for some people it doesn't work. And I don't think, I mean, human beings are so heterogeneous in terms of our preferences, our skills, our risk averseness, everything, that you have to figure out what works for you. Yeah.
Okay. Now, moving back to the UPSC thing, why did you
Mhm.
choose the path of UPSC? What intrigued you about it?
So my main sort of affection for UPSC came when I was doing an internship in the chief economic advisors team in the Ministry of Finance. So basically, my second year of college,
Hmm.
I had gotten selected for an internship in the Ministry of Finance back in Delhi, and I spent about 3 months at North Block, which is on Raisina Hill. And in front of like where PMO is. So in those 3 months, I would have at least met like 50, 60 IAS officers, ranging
Hmm.
from the levels of like deputy secretary to directors to joint secretaries, additional secretaries, secretaries. And I really loved their work. They seemed very satisfied and happy with their lives, and a lot of them motivated me to pursue UPSC. And I also felt that it's something I would really like because through my training in economics, I understand policy and I understand kind of both the macro and micro side of things. So it was something that kind of fit well in both ways, that I had a great internship experience and my subject was such that public policy, administration, and government are like very natural things that economists tend to go to.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah,
Okay, that makes sense. And also, you being an SRCC graduate, the campus has a really powerful influence on students of pursuing MBA, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
many people in the top B schools of the country or the top B schools of the world are from SRCC college, right? So why didn't you take that road of MBA? Did you give it a thought?
That is actually like a very, very good question, Dhruv. And it's something I often think about as well. But so I think with me, to be honest, I've always been a bit of a contrarian in life in the sense that um, I I don't know how, but I've kind of had the confidence to just believe in my own convictions and follow them. So what I felt in college was that a lot of like my friends were doing MBA for the sake of doing an MBA and not because they had really thought it through or because they wanted a great salary after an MBA. So like my college roommate went to I.M.MBA. My other flatmate, both of whom are like, one of my closest friends to date, he went to ISB. Another of my best friends, she's currently at Harvard Business School. So, like, even my closest friends are like only MBAs. But I really liked economics, and I felt that, why should I follow the crowd if I have a passion for this subject? So that is the reason why, because I had a passion for the subject and because I felt like I didn't just want to follow the herd mentality, is kind of why I went after it. And another kind of experience which also informed this decision was like, campus placements in SRCC. So campus placements are like, this, it's like a culmination of a lot of emotions for students because it's like आपको क्लास 6 से क्लास 10 में क्लास 12 में बोला जाता है कि अच्छे से पढ़ाई करो एंड इफ यू स्टडी योर लाइफ इज सेट ओके एंड देन पीपल स्टडी रियली हार्ड दे गेट इनटू एसआरसीसी बट the main reason why people studied so hard for SRCC was to get those good placements. Okay.
Correct, correct, correct.
And you get like very good packages and good companies for like a 21-year-old in India. So um, during placements, I felt that a lot of people were just say going into consulting or investment banking because that was the sexy thing to do or that was like the herd mentality without
Hmm.
really thinking and introspecting as to like why do they want to go into it, whether it's a good thing for them or not, and would they go for it 80% of the crowd never went for it, for example.
Yeah.
So I think that seeing that experience, and I also myself sat through like all those placements, and then that's how I got that consulting job offer. But I realized that herd mentality is something I do not want to go after ever. And I think I was perhaps like the very few people out of my batch who actually took a gap year and did UPSC, you know.
Hmm.
And despite getting a job offer, I did not take it up. So the point is that, I think, and that experience has actually helped me become much, much more contrarian as I go through life. Like I've developed this conviction of following my own belief and kind of following what I like to do. Yeah.
And how did so okay, this question is for the 20-year-old, 18-year-old Vatsal who is in SRCC right now.
Uh-huh.
As you are an economics student, a bachelor's in economics student, how do you plan a career trajectory towards World Bank and IMF?
Okay. So if I was an 18, 20-year old, and if I take back kind of myself to that place, I would say the first thing to do is um, preferably get into economics. But if you can't get into economics, then try to become a sector expert. So the way it
Okay.
works at the World Bank is that, so World Bank and IMF, there's slight differentiation, which I'll elaborate, which is that World Bank is like, World Bank is in each and every kind of sector of the world. So whether that's education, health, nutrition, investments, manufacturing, agriculture, like whatever your interest is, even digitalization. So even if somebody's a great digital marketer, they can also go to the World Bank. So my point is, World Bank also has its own private equity and VC arm. So my point is, become a deep sector expert, okay? And if you're a deep sector expert and you have 4, 5, 6 years of work experience in your sector, you can easily then go to the World Bank, right? Because
Okay.
World Bank will willingly take you. Or if you don't kind of have a sector kind of theme, then pursue a degree in economics. So World Bank has basically two types of people, economists and specialists. Those are like the two job titles of the bank. So either you have a degree in economics, which is like a bachelor's and a master's and even a PhD. And then if you don't have the economics track, then you become like a deep sector expert. Even climate change is like a big, big field now. So, the World Bank is like whatever you're doing in life, you can find a way to get yourself to the World Bank if you wish to. So that is with the World Bank. The IMF is much, much more focused and analytical, where you need to have either like a strong degree in economics, so bachelor's, master's, PhD in preferably in macroeconomics. And if not, you need to have a lot of experience or specialization in finance. And I don't mean the CFA type of finance. I mean more the hardcore masters in finance where you have good mathematical training and you know the theory behind financial models, for example. So these two types of people would be, say, very good for the IMF. The IMF also hires a lot of people who have worked in the government. So if you worked in, say, Reserve Bank of India or Ministry of Finance in India,
Hmm.
or in some ministry with like good financial oriented work experience, IMF is also a great place for you. So yeah, this would be kind of my advice for an 18 or 20-year old.
Okay. And how often do you work with MBAs?
How often do I work? I mean, do these people, I mean, the World Bank and IMF work with MBAs, you mean?
Yeah, can take it
So
that way as well.
yeah, so IMF actually has like very negligible number of MBAs. Most people are like either from a pure econ background, or even if they have an MBA background, they've probably worked at, say, Goldman Sachs for 5 or 10 years, or like JP Morgan, or like one of the big financial institutions for 5 or 10 years. And then they join the IMF. And even within the IMF, they only join like a very niche kind of department, which is like the monetary and capital markets department. Um, but in the World Bank, I have found a lot of MBAs as well. So World Bank has its own private equity and venture capital arm, which is called the International Finance Corporation, and they invest in other funds and they do impact investing as well. So there you'll find a lot of like MBAs and CFAs and CAIAs and these types of people. And even within like core World Bank, you'll find people who have had done an MBA, but then they got expertise in say the agriculture sector, or they got expertise in like education or health, or like some core part of, or even climate change, for example. So
Yeah.
the idea is to basically go to the World Bank's website and kind of look at like what are the different areas that the bank is working in, and then an MBA will be a great fit for you if you have requisite work experience in that particular sector.
Perfect. And if I ask you, so these institutions like World Bank and IMF, these are not governed by any government, right?
Yes. So these are basically sovereign institutions in and of themselves, and um, every country has a shareholding in them. So it's pretty much, you can think of it as like a pure multilateral, which is very, very unique. So for example, like World Bank employees and IMF employees do not pay any income tax
Okay.
um, to the US government, because World Bank is and IMF are considered sovereign institutions in and of themselves. IMF is the only non-country which can issue its own currency in the world. So, you probably never hear of that, of like a sovereign institution, which is not a country, which can issue its own currency and which is like very, very acceptable and very, very high creditworthiness. So these two are like very, very interesting organizations in that sense, and they have their roots in the 1945 Bretton Woods Agreement, basically
Hmm.
after World War II, to kind of
Correct.
oversee the financial and economic architecture of the world, and to help countries rise out of poverty and introduce development policies all across the world. So that's kind of the genesis how World Bank and IMF came about. Yeah.
So do IMF have their own currency right now? And what is it called, if it is?
Yeah, so it's called special drawing rights, so
Oh,
SDR, and it's basically pegged. I mean, every currency kind of has like, values kind of pegged to it, and each country has, so each country's reserve bank or their monetary authority will basically have, for example, billions of dollars of SDR or billions of SDR, and
hmm.
then they can use those SDRs to help in their balance of payments or help in their external capital flow transactions, and also like borrow against the SDR as well. So no other person can hold SDRs, only governments can hold SDRs. So that's kind of how SDRs function. Yeah, in a very broad overview kind of way. Yeah.
So I wanted to take this conversation to that particular angle where I wanted to ask you, how does a organization which is not governed by any government in the world, how is the work culture present in that particular organization?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. So, the work culture at both the IMF and the World Bank,
Yeah.
you can say, is like the perfect mix between the private sector and public sector.
Okay.
Okay. So, because like our clients or the people we serve are basically governments,
Hmm.
we deal with government agencies and bureaucrats and ministries a lot. So, there is some element of like, so even within World Bank and IMF, you'll see a whole bureaucracy kind of approach to how the institutions are set up. You'll find better work-life balance compared to like investment banking or consulting, for example. But you
Hmm.
also have private sector mentality in terms of very merit-oriented approach, very, very competitive, very brilliant and intellectually smart people, good salaries, and sort of a very progressive and forward-looking mindset in general. And the other thing also is that it's probably the most internationally diverse place you can work. So for
Hmm.
example, like the team I work with, there are 7 people in the team,
Yeah.
and My boss is from Switzerland. Two of the senior economists are from Greece and Armenia. One person is from Senegal. Another person is from Pakistan. Another person is from Vietnam. I am from India. And then my department, my larger department, probably has over 100 nationalities represented in it. So I've met people from Fiji, from Sao Tome, from Mongolia. Like the person whose office is right next to mine is from Mongolia. When I get lunch, I'm probably getting lunch with like people from 10 different nationalities in a week. So it's like as diverse as it can possibly get. Yeah. So that is a very, very interesting part of working in these organizations. Yeah.
So there's this concept of DE&I, that is diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? How is
Yeah.
that maintained in such a diverse organization where you have people coming from the entire, all the parts of the world?
So, IMF has very, very nuanced and well thought out policies on DEI. So, ensuring that all countries are adequately represented, that if there are certain minority groups that are not represented, you have employment drives for those people from those backgrounds. There's a very, very good parity between men and women employees in terms of the numbers at the IMF. And then you just have like even in the smallest of smallest things, it's like even if there is supposing a task force that is made for some very niche topic, you will
Yeah.
not just have representation from say different cultures and different and like male and female genders, but also across hierarchies. So from the senior
Okay.
most person to the junior most employee, you'll have representation all across. And there's a lot of emphasis on high quality training and courses on DEI, and managers and senior management making a very active and sincere push towards DEI. So it's a very, very diverse, it's a very equitable, and it's a very inclusive organization to work at.
Hmm. That's interesting. And now let's take two steps backwards and let's talk about World Bank, your life at World Bank.
Yeah.
Right. So what was World Bank a campus convert for you from Yale?
So it wasn't a campus convert. It was actually like I got the job through cold emailing,
Okay.
basically. And so typically World Bank does not come to campuses and it does not hire people from there. They have kind of their own, you just apply through the website or you cold email people and you kind of get something set up that way. So that
Yeah.
is how basically I had done it. So I just emailed like a bunch of people there, and my former manager replied to my cold email, and then I had about three interviews, and that's kind of how I got there. And
Hmm.
then in terms of the work was actually pretty exciting. So I was in the education global practice at the World Bank, and
Hmm.
I was handling basically three countries, which were Tanzania, Bangladesh, and Nepal. So
Yeah.
what we were doing is we were doing so World Bank is, I mean, because it's a bank at the end of the day, it is
Yeah.
lending money. Okay.
Hmm.
And it is lending money for projects on the ground. So, for example, like one of the projects I was working on was this adolescent girl child education project in Bangladesh, where World Bank had lent money to Bangladesh's education ministry and getting projects off the ground, whether it was infrastructure projects or capacity building or technical education type of projects. We were doing those. And my
Yeah.
work was basically to coordinate with the officials in the Bangladesh Education Ministry, uh, help them get those projects executed on the ground, do a lot of data analysis, a lot of econometric modeling to like um, ensure the viability of those projects. And whenever they needed our help with anything related to the education sector, we would help them in that. So that was the lending part of it. Another component of it was very heavy research. So for the Tanzania government, the Tanzania government had sort of asked the World Bank to do a big research paper on, they wanted to figure out, what teacher characteristics best predict student learning outcomes. So they wanted to know that, what is it
Mhm.
about a teacher that ensures that her students are doing well? So a teacher has educational qualifications, the way they teach. There are like hundreds of variables you can get and understand about a teacher. And then we did very intense machine learning modeling. So I was actually coding a lot in Python and R and doing like, very intense machine learning and econometric and data science kind of work. And we were trying to see what is it about it. So we had data on about say 4 to 5,000 teachers and about 40,000 students. And we had the test scores of those students, and each student was like mapped to a particular teacher. So we were trying to do a lot of data analysis to kind of figure out that if a student is scoring high, what is it about a teacher that's explaining that? And we wrote an entire paper on it, and it was very well received by the government, and a lot of their subsequent policies sort of came out of that. So that was kind of the very interesting part, which was that you got to actually implement sort of research ideas into actual public policy in terms of education
Mhm.
policy inside Tanzania. And even in Nepal, like I did a lot of work with education, but for deaf and blind children over there.
Yeah.
So we were doing some edtech work for deaf, and we are developing edtech solutions for deaf and blind children. So it was pretty interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so working with countries such as Tanzania and Bangladesh and Nepal, these are very underdeveloped and developing nations, right?
Yeah.
So, working on the educational front of these countries, how did that change your philosophy towards education? Being a graduate from Yale, which is one of the biggest B schools of the country.
So yeah, like that's a
I'm
very,
sorry,
very
of the world.
yeah. Point well taken. Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question, because I think what I realized was that, you know, people like us who, have, are attending elite institutions,
Hmm.
whether that's in India or in the US or any part of the world, we actually are very, very fortunate to get a first degree education, to get a very high quality education. But if you go deep inside rural Tanzania, or even if you go to the capital city, or if you go in districts in Nepal and Bangladesh, I mean, Bangladesh and Nepal are very similar to India in terms of how a lot of parts of India are very similar to those countries. So you get to see that a lot of grade 3 and grade 5 students cannot even solve a class 1 math problem or a class 1 English problem. And you realize how there is so much that needs to be solved in education that it totally blew my mind, and it was a very humbling experience. And there is so much that needs to still be done, and a lot of their systems and a lot of education policies are still so backward, made in the 1940s or 50s, that the scope for reform is there's a vast scope of reform, but there are a lot of political economy problems in those countries, because of which these sectors cannot be reformed. So there was a host of things we learned, and then I also learned the value of like critical analysis and data analysis to solve a particular problem. So you know in the Tanzania project I worked on,
Yeah.
typically what we think is that, agar aap, if you give higher salaries to teachers, or if you train teachers better, their students will actually do better. But what we realized in that paper was that teacher beliefs actually played a big role. So teachers have to believe inherently that they can make a difference to their students' lives. So, when we ran surveys on teachers, one of the questions we asked the teacher was, do you think this child will become anything big in life if the child is educated? And a lot of teachers were saying no. So the teachers were very apathetic, and their beliefs about the student were very skewed. So what we recommended to the Tanzanian government was, you should do a lot of training on like uplifting teacher beliefs, and you should basically target and maybe even recruit those types of teachers who are intrinsically motivated enough to teach and who have very aligned beliefs with the student, for
Correct.
example. But this is something that you will not see in the ordinary discourse, or you will not see in policy debates surrounding education. And I also got to present this paper at Oxford University like last to last year. And even there, like we got a very good reception, and a lot of people came up to me and were asking that this is a very interesting area of research. And even at a place like Oxford, which is very, very academic, they saw the promise of how research can inform policy and can improve the lives of people.
Hmm.
So that was a very transformational experience for me in terms of how I view education myself as well. Yeah.
Your answer left me completely, disbalanced from my particular set of conventional knowledge that I have about education in the world. And also, as we talk about your working with the education in these underdeveloped developing nations, as you know what the on-ground reality is, and you living in one of the most developed nations in the world, how do you philosophize the lifestyle of you living in one of the biggest countries, and you seeing those also currently also with IMF you have been working, I'm sure you have been working with developed and underdeveloped and developing nations. How do you philosophize this completely in your life?
So I think the first kind of emotion you kind of get is like extreme gratitude and an orientation towards public service. So I think
Mhm.
I've been very fortunate that kind of the last 4 years I've gotten to work almost as an international civil servant where, I am working for the upliftment, whether that's through macro policies or whether that's through micro policies in education, to sort of inform policy making and help policymakers do a better job.
Yeah.
In terms of, so that's the kind of the second emotion that I feel, which is a lot of about public service.
Mhm.
And the other thing also is that this kind of work is it's very intellectually stimulating.
Yeah.
So and you need to attract and have, you know, the smartest people working on these problems. So, at the World Bank or IMF, for example, there is this big, especially at the World Bank, especially like there's this big debate that a lot of staff members have, which is, that they are getting good salaries and they're sitting in air conditioned offices, but the people they're helping are actually, very downtrodden and very underprivileged. But
Correct.
the counter argument for that is that if you want the world's smartest minds to come work in public policy, you need to incentivize them, because I could have also gone to a Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or like, a McKinsey or whatever the case may be. But people consciously choose to work in public policy, and people consciously choose to work for the upliftment of other people. So this is something even Ajay Banga, who's the current World Bank president, also says the same thing, which is anybody working at the World Bank or IMF can easily go anywhere and get, can probably double or triple their salary pretty easily. But they choose not to because they're very motivated by the ideals of public service and to do a good job and have an impact in the world. So there's a big sense of purpose and create in wanting to create impact.
Fair enough. And what exactly is your work at IMF, if you can like quickly run us through that particular part?
Sure. So currently, like my work at the IMF is one of intense macroeconomic research. So I currently am assigned to three countries. So I work in the Asia Pacific department, and the three countries I work with are Thailand, Myanmar, and Hong Kong, which are very interesting countries in and of themselves. So I'll give you the case of Thailand, where what we do is that every year we have something known as the Article 4 consultation, where basically IMF presents like a very empirically rigorous report about how IMF views the economy of Thailand and what are the risks and what are the challenges, and providing macroeconomic advice to Thailand. And in that, you get to cover all aspects of the Thai economy. whether that's their exchange rate policy or inflation or balance of payments or fiscal policy, monetary policy, financial market policy, capital market policies. So you get to do deep dives into all of those. So it involves a lot of data work. It involves a lot of econometrics and running a lot of regressions, for example, and having a very, very good idea of what the macroeconomic drivers of, say, that particular economy are. So I personally worked on two projects which I co-authored. One was understanding the drivers of inflation in Thailand, because in the last 2, 3 years, inflation was a huge issue across the world,
Yeah,
not just in
right.
Thailand, even in India, even in the US. So we were understanding in the Thai context what sort of was the reason for that. And we had amazing, very granular survey level data. So we had data on 46,000 households, and on each household, we had data on like 600 variables. So, like, very granular expenditure patterns, income patterns, education, debt levels. And basically, we had a full 360-degree view on what are Thai households looking like. And then you do a lot of simulations, you do a lot of macro analysis, a lot of econometrics to give the Thai authorities a very good idea of like how they should think about their inflation policy or their monetary policy, for example.
Right.
And we do a lot of studies across, like, as I said, exchange rate, fiscal policy. Another work I did was on corporate market power. So understanding what are the degrees of how monopolized or how anti-competitive is a given economy, or which sectors within the Thai economy are more monopolized than the others, and what are the reasons why that monopolization is happening.
Mhm.
So this is another project I worked on, and it was very well received by the Thai authorities. And we're basically, in a nutshell, if I were to explain, we're like macroeconomic consultants and advisors to the Thai government. And in some respect, IMF is a macroeconomic advisor to all governments of the world.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. Okay, as you talked about creating an impact in your previous answer, also your content creation on the platform of LinkedIn, is that another source of you creating an impact in the world?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think exactly, which this kind of leads me to sort of the first introduce yourself kind of answer question that you had asked, which is, in the last 2.5 years, 3 years, I've also started posting content on LinkedIn quite actively.
Hmm.
And posting very raw and authentic stuff, and kind of posting like almost a journal of my life, but from a career angle. And that's also been a great source of satisfaction and inspiration for me, and kind of opened up this entire different world which I never knew of. And it's been a great learning experience. So yeah, with content, it's more like I post about things that I am inspired by, that I want to help people with. And then I also help a lot of people personally with their careers, and personally help them with kind of whatever they want help with. So it's been very satisfying. So helping people with resumes, with jobs, with interviews, with college applications, with
Hmm.
teaching them how to network, how to sort of think about their life and their career as well. So those are some things I love to cover on LinkedIn, and it's something that I pray and I hope only increases and goes from strength to strength every year. Yeah.
Perfect. And what are your future plans? So, do you want to get into academia after getting a master's in economics?
So I currently, yeah, like, I've already done my master's in economics, and for like the first, sort of the last, I mean, not the first, but yeah, the last 2, 3 years, I was also very actively considering a PhD in economics, and,
Hmm.
working as an academic or working as a policymaker, and then, I don't know, returning to India as like RBI deputy governor or governor or something. That's like a very sort of a track that a lot of people have taken. But I think now I kind of want to explore. Um, um, I have a few ideas, like a few sort of businesses I kind of want to start. So,
Hmm.
I'm kind of intensely evaluating myself, whether I should continue with my job and actively work. And because the thing with me is like, I love and I'm curious about many things in life. So I love the job that I do. I love the work that I do, but I'm also passionate about like two, three other things as well. So one of which is content creation. The other is like full-time, just becoming a full-time career counselor and like helping people with like careers and jobs and college applications. I also love investing, and I'm also a big investing nerd. And I also, I've helped a lot of friends with their portfolios and stuff. So I would also love to be a fund manager because I think I really enjoy it and I have a lot of the skill sets and stuff. And I currently invest and trade very actively in both the Indian and US markets as well. And I've been doing it since I was 15, 16 years old. And, if you see, like, there are a lot of like, there are at least like 7 to 8 computer terminals here as well. Like, in my home. So it's something I'm also very passionate about. But this is something that my dad also does very actively. So through him, I advise him and I help him a lot. So through that, I also have a fund management kind of angle I want to get into. So yeah, as I said, harping back to my original answer, which is like I have two, three kind of micro experiments I'm running with my life even right now.
Yeah.
And I have a stable job which I love and which gives me a lot of satisfaction. And I have these two, three things I'm kind of tinkering and experimenting with. So let's see where life goes. But I know whatever I do, I'll be happy and satisfied, and I'll be able to make a career out of it. So yeah, yeah.
Okay. A question just randomly comes to my mind. Will you consider UPSC again?
No, I will not do UPSC again. That is something I'm very sure of because of two reasons. The first reason is that I think it's a lottery ticket in a lot of ways, and I'm getting to actually do a lot of public service and civil service kind of work, but at a much international level.
Hmm.
So that is one reason, and the second is that I think as India's economy grows, the government will liberalize the civil services much more and get external experts, and which is what we call as lateral entry. So this is
Hmm.
something I do have in mind that when I'm in my mid 30s or mid 40s, I would love to join the government at a much senior level, and that is something I'm confident that right now the system does not exist, but in 10, 15, 20 years the government is going to open up to like external experts working in the bureaucracy. It's still happening at a very micro level, but I'm pretty sure it's going to happen in 10, 15 years at a much larger scale. So that at that time, I can also join the government. So I don't see much kind of incentives to take the UPSC right now, so to say. Yeah.
Beautiful aspirations you have towards life, don't you?
Yeah,
Okay. So I won't be taking much of your time now because I so want to dive deeper into the topics, but okay, we'll keep that for some other episode. Coming towards the end of the podcast, I just want to know, just want to ask one more question to you, or
sure.
rather, some suggestions to the aspiring managers of the future. How can they make a larger than life contribution like you are making, working with IMF and World Bank in the industry and make a name for themselves?
I think what I would basically suggest two things is um, intensely network a lot.
Okay.
Again, this is very counterintuitive advice, but this is something that I have come to have a lot of conviction with, which is, ultimately, like any opportunity in life, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
you'll only get to know about that opportunity through people. Okay. And I think with our careers, we basically are driven by two things. We're driven by opportunity and we're driven by inspiration, right?
Mm.
So, the epicenters of both inspiration and opportunity are other human beings. So, try to network as much as you can and meet interesting people in your life. And through that, it's a very random process, yes, but through that, you will get inspired and you'll get a lot of opportunity and work with interesting people that you like. Would be kind of my advice. And I love networking myself, and I love meeting as many different people as I can, and like getting good inspiration and opportunity from them and working with them. And the second I would say is try to do something of your own. So do not have your identity fixed with just your MBA degree or just your job. have something of your own. And I don't mean to say like have like a million billion dollar startup or have like, you know, something that generates 2 3 lakhs a month, but at least have something that you are passionate about and you go deep into it. Now, for me, that was like helping people with their careers and LinkedIn content creation. For you, it may be totally something else. For a third person, it may be completely something else. But I think the world is set up so well today with the internet and with these content platforms that you can monetize, commoditize, and scale your passion, right? So I would say spend some time every week just pursuing deeply whatever you have an interest in. Your job, your placements, your applications, all of those things will keep going on. Your partying and your relationships and your family and your all of those things will keep going on, but have something that you can really call your own, because that will open up a different world to you. That will give you more independence, not just monetary independence, but also psychological independence, identity independence, which I think is very, very, your personality will just change overnight. So, what I want to kind of portray with this answer is I want to give a little bit of unconventional advice, because from other podcasts or by other, you find a lot of YouTube videos that will tell you, work hard and like develop a skill. And those are conventional pieces of advice. But two pieces of advice like I would probably give is like network intensely, get to know other people because they are epicenters of inspiration and opportunity. And second would be deep dive into your passions. And even if you don't know what you're passionate about, start doing 3 4 different things, and your passions will latently show themselves up to you, you know.
Oh, okay.
And once you have that, pursue them deeply, and the world is set up in such a good way that you'll be able to monetize and scale that quite easily. Yeah.
This is quite interesting because what we are doing right now, this podcast, is something that is my own for me. So I've been running a podcast for like more than 2 years, almost 3 years now. So this
Wow.
is a podcast that I'm doing for I.M. Sirmaur. But previously, before joining this college, I used to run this podcast by the name of Koi Nahi Baat Batao. And
Wow.
I plan to continue it for the entire life to just
Yeah,
document some of the greatest conversations.
exactly. And it's great that you have discovered that you are passionate about podcasting, for example, and having conversations and kind of keeping a library of those conversations accessible to other people.
Yeah.
You discovered your passion. And why could you do it? I think because you tried it, So exactly, like other people should also kind of try what their passions are and just deep dive into it. That's pretty much it.
I
Yeah.
completely agree. Completely agree. So, with this, I would like to come to the end of the podcast. And also, I can like bluntly say that this is one of the most heaviest, if not the heaviest podcast that I've ever recorded. A lot of information flowing here and there. So, it is definitely a good addition to someone who is listening to it till the end.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vatsal, for joining us today. I know there are some time constraints, but we'll be connecting later soon and we'll be recording one more episode. Definitely.
Definitely. I think you asked some of the questions you asked were like very, very pointed and questions I don't normally get. So, I think I really enjoyed this episode as well. And definitely, we should record another one. And I'm glad if any of your viewers took value of this and if they want to reach out to me, I'm totally available on LinkedIn as well. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Dhruv. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
I hope you had a great time on this conversation. Also, towards the end, I just want to state this one thing. So, we have a team here at I.M.MBA, and one of the members, who is one of the closest friends of mine, also from SRCC, is a huge, huge admirer of yours. I'll definitely connect you with him. And
Okay.
he wanted
Okay.
to talk to you.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, connect kar do. Would love to talk to fellow SRCC alumni. Definitely, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So, with this, let's wrap this podcast up. Thank you so much, whoever was listening till the end. Thank you so much, Vatsal, for joining us today. I
Thank
hope you
you.
had a great time and stay tuned, keep learning, and peace out.